Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission.
My whole life had been about sports and other things, and that was gone. So now there's a vacuum that has to be filled somewhere. And I just really, for the first time in my life, since like there's something bigger than me. There's, the Lord is calling me to this. I sense the Lord's purpose in this, and He's opening doors.
Yeah.
And so I just never wanted to be the person who said, no, I'm just not going to do it. And so every time the door opened, I went, and that ended up being kind of a lot. And so I've done, closing in on now, something like 120 trips, more than 50 countries.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and so that's how I get started.
Yes, yeah.
Doing short-term missions.
Well, as you describe that, it's a microcosm, I think, of so many different people's stories. And I have to ask a couple things just kind of come up to me. Does God do this? Does He take something that's so dear to us all individually? We have different things, different inclinations, different giftings, different passions. Yours was sports in many ways. Does He take the most precious thing for us in order to replace it with something better? What do you think was happening in that season of your life? Well, I pause you right there because I think a lot of people are experiencing this.
Sure.
They have to give up something for...
So my wife and I, we often talk about my inability to remember things about our dating life, okay? and I tell her often, I said, if I knew this was going to be my last first something, I would have remembered it differently. Like if I knew this was my last first date, I would think about it in a whole different way. But I thought for sure I was on borrowed time. She was going to kick me to the curb, and that's how it was. But it ended up being that it wasn't that. And so in retrospect, I wish I had given more value to all of those moments in the beginning, but I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes.
And I think in that moment, I can look back at my life and I can say, okay, here's what the Lord was doing. I see it now. But for sure in those moments, I didn't see any of that.
Yes.
All I saw was a challenge, a sacrifice, God calling me in a particular way. And I would never want to say to somebody, this is the journey you have to walk.
Yeah.
But it was the journey I had to walk.
Well, everyone's story is different, like you said. And everyone has got these, God is very interested in what I would call divine intersections.
Yeah.
And you look back, in retrospect, they're always easy to see. In the midst of it, though, people are struggling with a certain something. And I guess that's the whole point of this podcast, and that's why I'm lingering here for a while. Missions Pulse, know God's heart, join His mission.
Yeah.
Know God's heart, join His mission. So once we are awakened or enlightened or aware of something, you and your first mission trip, the reality of people beyond our country's borders, and then there's a response that must happen. John Piper might say, go, send, or disobey, right? But it's going to cost something. It's David said, that which cost me nothing is not worthy to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
Looking back, do you regret that? Do you wish you had some baseball cards out and I'd stick them in the back tire of my bicycle? I wouldn't do that with your cards.
No, I think most days, 9 out of 10, maybe more, I'm really, really happy with the way some of this stuff has turned out. But if you're honest, you do have days that you look back and you say, like, this sacrifice seems heavy. Yeah. And I'm sitting here in Thailand when I could be at home with my family.
Yes.
And I will be home with my family soon, right? But those sacrifices have cost me over the years. And I don't regret that. I don't feel like I've sacrificed more than other people really, but that I think everybody's sacrifice is really that is costly. And I think to follow the Lord, there are parts of it that are costly. And you feel it, know, and I have for sure. There have been some real challenges through that process, but most days I'm just thrilled, with the opportunities that I've been given, and the privilege that it is to get to share the gospel and to train leaders, and that the Lord would put me in contact with people who are doing really, really incredible stuff around the globe. It's just such a humbling thing for me most of the time.
Yes, yeah.
And the other times I gotta, preach the gospel to myself like everybody else, and remember that it's a great privilege to get to do what we get to do, and my sacrifice is small compared to many. Sure,
I think when we're talking about the sacrifices we're making, we're have biblical characters in the background of our mind here, thinking about Paul shipwrecked, chasing snakes chasing him, and all these stoning beatings. Maybe our sacrifices are not as to that extent, but they're still painful and sacrificial. And I really feel like we should linger there on that. That which cost me nothing is not worthy to be sacrificed. But on the flip side, Okay, suddenly there's these glory stories and some great adventure that God is calling us into. Tell me about some of your...
Man, so I think that's so true. I very often, I think one of the more difficult things for me is communicating with people who, in an attempt to, like, they're not trying to puff me up. But they look at me as if I'm some sort of person that is not like them, because I'm traveling all over the place and I'm speaking and sharing the gospel. And for me, I've never saw it that way. I've always looked in the mirror and felt like, like inadequate. And just doing the best I can and taking the opportunities that I have. But they look at it and they're like, I can never do that. It's like, you totally could do that, right?
Yeah. God loves to use ragamuffin misfits, man.
Yeah, I mean, what option do we have? Right? So, I mean, this is the option. We look through the scripture, that's what we find, is broken people that God uses. And I'm grateful for that situation. But I think it's difficult. Sometimes you say, here's my story. Here's another story. I was privileged to get to know Keith Wheeler a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know Keith or don't. But
I've heard of him, and I've never met him, but I did listen to the podcast where you had him on your podcast, projectdoxa.com, for those of people who want to go check that out.
So Keith's such an amazing guy. I mean, he's traveling all over the world doing incredible stuff. And he was a guy who was influential in my life at a pretty important time. And he shares this story. And it's on that, I shared that story on that podcast episode, but I had him share the story. But he's traveling, he carries a wooden cross, right? That's like his thing. And so he's carrying the cross, and he's telling this story that was just really impactful. And it's the same. I had the same reaction when I heard this story as I think people have when I share some of these stories. And the reaction is like, "Well, that's awesome for you."
Yeah.
And that was my reaction. So he tells this story. He's walking, carrying the cross, and he tells it, of course, better than me. You can listen there. But he's walking. He's really thirsty, and he had this thought like, "Man, I'd really just love to have an orange Fanta."
An orange Fanta.
And in some places in the world, I mean, and so a lady comes up. I mean, I'm abridging the story, but like a lady comes up, basically rolls down her window and says, "Are you thirsty?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's thinking, she's going to direct him to a place or whatever. And she's like, "Would you like an orange Fanta?"
That's okay.
And he said, "Yeah." And she had like an ice chest with like 6 orange Fantas. And she shares about how she felt like God spoke to her that morning to get in the car, drive a long distance, and meet this guy and give him an orange Fanta.
Wow.
So he tells this story, and everybody's like, "Wow, what an amazing story." And it really is an amazing story. But I remember sitting in the room when he shared this story, and I thought, yeah, must be nice. Must be nice.
What a charmed life you live.
Yeah, God's always doing great stuff for Keith, right? And I felt like the Lord really spoke to me in that moment that I don't give him an opportunity. And I made a decision, I'm gonna do the best I can to live my life in such a way that God has an opportunity to do some crazy stuff.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join his mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought. Also, you might want to check out this video here. And honestly, that one's not bad either. Make sure you subscribe to Missions Pulse by clicking the subscribe button right here, and also click that little bell button so you get notified every single time we post a new video.